There's jubilation in Israel and Palestine as people are reunited with their loved ones after years in captivity. But what next for Trump's peace plan?
Well, see, now you can be a little bit nicer, baby, because you're not at war anymore, baby.
Will Tony Blair become governor of Gaza? Or will Netanyahu just resume his bombardments? Joining me to discuss this is former Israeli negotiator Daniel Levy. Great to meet you.
Good to be with you.
Beyond this exchange of people in captivity, has anything actually been agreed about what's going to happen next?
So that's the thing, and let's start as you did, like huge relief, deeply emotional pictures, people coming home, being united with their loved ones, the last 20 Israelis, military-age males, Palestinians who were put behind bars by a military tribunal of an illegal occupation being released, and of course the overwhelming relief. Palestinians aren't being bombed, displaced, starved, things not being destroyed. And that's as far as it goes in terms of what they've managed to agree on detail, other than getting the aid in. Also hugely crucial, but that still apparently will have an envelope of Israeli oversight.
Tony Blair, he was in Sharm el-Sheikh for this summit with Trump, and he's being touted as a governor of Gaza. What do you make of all that?
More than a century after the Balfour Declaration, you kind of do a Scrabble word remix. You throw the letters of Balfour up in the air, you add one, and you get Blair as the next governor. I think it shows how, A, divorced from any interest in Palestinians this whole thing is. B, I would say how unrealistic it is. If those who were at that Sharm summit with Trump were being at all honest, they would have told him, really bad idea, Mr. President. Not going to play well with our publics, with us. And I think it's just indicative of the dystopian reality we all live in. Palestine has, in this last period, been exhibit A in the absurdities around the inequities of our lives today. Blair is a doubling down on that.
And when you were an Israeli negotiator in the 1990s during the Oslo peace process, Yasser Arafat actually made huge concessions. Now, today, the Palestinians are in an even weaker bargaining position. Do you think they can get anything much out of these negotiations? Can they get Israel to really fully withdraw from Gaza?
The power dynamics that you refer to, Palestinians then made significant concessions, which didn't bode well for them. What about now? On the one hand, that power asymmetry has been exacerbated. Palestinian national movement largely collapsed. Israel militarily where it is. There's a flip side to that. The flip side to that is Israel seems to be a lot more exposed in terms of the layers of BS that people have peeled off over the last 2 years. And so those who are pushing for accountability, trying to get their governments to act, I don't think are going to say, oh, great, fair enough, this is done now, we're going home, we can roll up that flag. So I think the potential Israeli vulnerability from outside pressure is there in ways that it wasn't, but that won't happen automatically. That's going to be a long, hard slog.
Throughout the genocide, Netanyahu said one of the goals was to defeat Hamas. Hamas had to disarm. And Keir Starmer, when he arrived in Egypt for these talks, said that Britain would use its experience from Northern Ireland to help disarm Hamas. But the group have said that they would only hand over their weapons to a future Palestinian army. Is Hamas being unreasonable?
The analogy to Northern Ireland, to the Good Friday Agreement. I mean, Good Friday Agreement, 35 pages. It requires referenda, it requires legislation. There is detail there. There is the buy-in of various factions. Sinn Féin is acknowledged as a negotiating partner that you have to bring into the room. And while de facto that's the case with Hamas, still the outside rhetoric is we have to remove them, destroy them, they must have no role. Silliness. The process in Ireland, not finished, it's true, but it was credibly understood by the Irish Catholic community as being a further stage in the rolling back of British colonisation. This paper reads more like an additional stage in the entrenchment of Israeli colonization, including the governance structure that is on that paper for Gaza, Governor Blair, and all of that stuff. Another thing that you might want to draw attention to is that agreement happens a century and a half approximately after British complicity in the Great Famine in Ireland. This is happening literally the morning after Israel has been conducting what is well documented by a UN Commission of Inquiry and others, what is up before the International Court of Justice as a genocide. You don't go from one to the other. There needs to be accountability in the equation, and none of that is there. The UK is trying to make itself sound useful. Oh, do we have a role? Do we have a role? But it's also an attempt to throw sand in the eyes of the British public, to obfuscate and distract here by saying, okay, we've moved on, we've turned a page, we're all going to be helping move forward, because they want this to go away. And it's up to the British public to make sure it doesn't go away and they don't succeed in throwing sand in our eyes.
One of the things that the British government took credit for, I think it was last month now, was finally recognising a Palestinian state. But very quickly, Middle East Minister Hamish Falconer clarified that that state would not have a right to an army or an air force.
A Palestinian state should be demilitarised. No army, no air force. It should pose no threat to the Israelis, with whom it should live in peace.
Given what the Palestinian people have been through, is it really realistic to expect them not to have a military to defend themselves? And is that even good for Israel? Wouldn't a professional army in Palestine be better than all these different armed groups?
So at the moment you have Hamas, with whom the Americans have been talking directly, who were the kind of essential counterparty to getting this deal. You have them, an armed resistance. They've violated international law on October 7th. I want to make that absolutely clear. Then you have the Palestinian Authority, elected over 3 decades ago, approximately, bleeding credibility, with very little say in terms of how their own people view them. They are deep in the business of collaborating and cooperating with Israel. They exist really at the goodwill of Israel and its allies. So what you don't have is a Palestinian, unified, credible political address, because they should be the first ones to adjudicate that question, right? This should come from a legitimate, representative Palestinian movement that can answer that question.
There have been calls for the PA needing to reform in order to take part in these negotiations. But when you look at what Netanyahu's idea of reform is, it's things like pulling out of the International Criminal Court, dropping any kind of international legal cases against Israel. Do you think that that's going to be an obstacle to the peace process?
So there are two ways of understanding the idea of Palestinian reform. One is something owned by the Palestinians, where the Palestinians assume the agency that has been lacking in that national movement. They rebuild a national movement in a unified way. And you have a Palestinian ability to challenge the status quo, to call time on recognizing Palestine and doing nothing about it being the thing that means you've done right by the Palestinians. That's a Palestinian-owned version of reform. Then you have the other version of reform, which is to say, here's the asymmetric reality of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Let's double down on it. Let's make it even more asymmetrical. The Canadian Prime Minister said, let's have a Zionist Palestinian state.
What I've called a Zionist Palestinian state, which is what we want.
But I think he was onto something, because that's what the Palestinians are being asked to do. That's what Palestinian reform means. And let's put it in the
What do you think he means by that?
He means a Palestinian state that exists to make things easy for Israel. Right. So it's not really a state. And therefore, I think he's put his finger on what we're really talking about. When most people say Palestinian state, they mean Bantustan. Tiny islands of Palestinian limited self-rule. And they are still, and this is the one holdout, I guess, of this Palestinian leadership, is that they haven't yet, in any negotiation, been willing to call what is categorically, unequivocally, overtly a mini Bantustan the realization of their national rights, self-determination and aspirations. But that's what the plan is.
There's a summit going on this week at Wilton Park, which is a kind of Foreign Office sort of away day kind of venue, and they're talking there about the reconstruction of Gaza. Do you have any insight into what might be being discussed there, or what the UK's plans are?
I think it's of a one with something we've discussed, which is, don't look over there. Don't look at the unearthing of yet more crimes of genocide. Media perhaps doing its job if it's allowed in and goes and tells us more about what's been going on, not that we don't know already. Don't look at the dead bodies being pulled out of the rubble every day. Don't look at the continuation of Israel's military occupation. Don't look at the continuation of apartheid. Please, definitely don't look at our complicity in this. Look over here. Look at this shiny thing that we're doing. We're doing Reconstruction. We're doing what's right by them. That's the game they're trying to play in order to put to sleep, to try and get this mass movement, this shift in the cultural zeitgeist, to hibernate so that they are not under pressure to do the things that actually need to be done. I hope people don't fall for it.
Daniel, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the share button. Thanks for watching.